The klaxon blared, a grating shriek that sliced through the sterile quiet of the command center. Lieutenant Zaria slammed her hand down on her console, its lights flashing in angry crimson. Status report. Her second-in-command, Captain Rhys, a grizzled veteran with eyes as sharp as his customized energy blade, tapped frantically at his own interface. We have multiple breaches detected on levels 3 and 4, he reported, his voice tight. Security protocols engaged, but we're losing containment. Zaria swore under her breath. Quantum Dawn Protocol hasn't been activated in over a century. What the hell could be causing? A holographic projection flickered to life above their consoles. The face of Admiral Thorne, his features creased with worry, filled the room. Lieutenant Zaria, he rasped, we may have seriously underestimated the situation. Initial scans indicate an unknown energy signature. It's ripping through our quantum barriers like paper. He paused, his gaze intense. The containment field is holding for now, but we need more information. What do you see? Zaria swiped through her interface, focusing on the security feeds from levels 3 and 4. Distorted shapes, swirling with unnatural energy, darted across the screens. Shadows stretched long and alien, consuming everything in their path. It's changing, she murmured, a shiver running down her spine. The containment protocols were designed to neutralize unstable quantum anomalies, Rhys said quietly. Not whatever this is. A deafening roar split through the command center as the sensors went offline. The holographic projection flickered, then vanished. On Zaria's console, a single line of code blinked crimson. Containment breach imminent. A cold wave of fear washed over her. This wasn't just an anomaly. It was something far more dangerous, something designed to break through their defenses. Zaria met Rhys's gaze, his eyes mirroring the same cold resolve. They knew it was a fight they couldn't afford to lose. Activate Emergency Protocol Gamma, Zaria ordered, her voice echoing in the silent command center. We're going in. The instant Zaria's order echoed through the command center, a wave of motion rippled outwards. Emergency lighting strobed red, bathing everything in an ominous glow. They were already moving before Rhys even finished activating the protocols, his boots pounding on the reinforced floor as they raced towards the emergency access shaft. Levels 3 and 4, Zaria barked, her voice tight with adrenaline. Secure those breaches. We need eyes on whatever's causing this. Rhys nodded, his gaze fixated on the flashing console ahead. Brigade Alpha is inbound, Lieutenant. ETA 5 minutes. The shaft plunged them into darkness. The metal stairs vibrated with a low hum as they descended deeper into the heart of the station. Zaria couldn't shake the feeling that the ground beneath their feet was alive, throbbing with a strange energy that seemed to pulse in sync with the alarm klaxons above. We should have sent an automated reconnaissance unit first, Rhys muttered, his voice echoing sharply in the confined space. This feels different. Zaria shared his unease. The chaotic energy signatures on their screens had felt wrong, out of place within their containment facility. It wasn't just a malfunction, this had intent behind it. Whatever was tearing through the station's barriers wasn't here by accident. They finally reached level 3, stepping into the sterile white corridors that had become eerily silent during their descent. Emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the walls like phantoms. Rhys drew his energy blade, its humming a stark counterpoint to the unsettling silence. He held it out in front of him as they moved deeper inwards, scanning every corner for signs of movement. Brigade Alpha, reporting, crackled a voice through their comms. Breach detected on Sector D5, multiple hostiles engaged. Zaria clenched her jaw. Not an anomaly. This was a coordinated assault. They were deeper into the station, closer to the core, and whatever had launched this attack was already making its move. Sector D5? Rhys muttered, his voice tight with urgency. That's near the main power conduit. If they take that offline... He didn't need to finish the sentence. Zaria knew the potential consequences. The station would plunge into chaos, crippled and vulnerable. They burst out of the stairwell, adrenaline pumping through their veins, onto a wide corridor buzzing with residual energy. A metallic stench hung heavy in the air, scorched insulation clinging to ventilation grates. Damaged security drones whirred uselessly on shattered panels, their optics extinguished. Brigade Alpha? Zaria barked into her comms, her voice strained but carrying authority. Report status. Static hissed back for a moment before a gruff, familiar voice responded. Lieutenant, we've engaged hostiles. We've managed to contain them in this sector, but the voice faltered, tinged with desperation. They're unlike anything I've ever seen. No identifiable weapons systems. Just pure energy manipulation. Rhys gripped his blade tighter, his gaze scanning the room for signs of movement. Energy manipulation? That explains these breaches. He pointed to a series of warped metal panels, contorted and twisted as if by an unseen force. Suddenly, the flickering emergency lights sputtered violently, plunging the corridor into near blackness for a heart-stopping second. Then they blazed back to life, casting dancing shadows across the walls. A faint, pulsating hum resonated through the floor, making their teeth ache with anticipation. Zaria felt a surge of unease. This was more than just rogue energy. It was intelligent, coordinated, and deadly. They're regrouping, Rhys said, his knuckles white as he pointed to the far end of the corridor, where a shimmering, translucent form coalesced from the flickering shadows. We need to cut them off before they reach the conduit. Brigade Alpha, Zaria called out. Maintain your position. We're engaging direct. Rhys nodded, his eyes locked onto the pulsing form as they prepared to face an enemy unlike anything they'd encountered before. This wasn't just about protecting the station. It was about survival. Lieutenant, we've engaged hostiles. We've managed to contain them in this sector, but... His voice faltered, laced with urgency. They're unlike anything I've ever seen. No identifiable weapons systems, just pure energy manipulation. Rhys gripped his blade tighter, the hum resonating against his knuckles as his gaze swept across the room. Energy manipulation? That explains these breaches. The former security officer gestured toward a series of warped metal panels, twisted and contorted as if by an unseen force, each a stark testament to the insidious power at play. Suddenly, the flickering emergency lights sputtered violently, plunging the corridor into near blackness for a heart-stopping second before blazing back to life, casting long, distorted shadows that danced across the walls. A low hum pulsed within the metal floor, vibrating through their boots with an unnerving intensity. Zaria felt a chill crawl down her spine. More than just rogue energy at work here. This was something intelligent, calculating, and undeniably dangerous. They're regrouping, Rhys hissed, his voice barely audible above the pulsating hum. He pointed to the far end of the corridor, where a shimmering, translucent form coalesced from the swirling shadows. Zaria shared his apprehension. Brigade Alpha, her voice commanded over the comms. Maintain your position. We're engaging direct. Rhys nodded, eyes locked on the pulsating anomaly as they prepared to face an enemy unlike anything they'd ever encountered. This wasn't just a battle for station control, it was a fight for survival. Let's hope Protocol Gamma was right about containment, Rhys muttered under his breath as the humming intensified, signaling their approaching foe. They moved closer, weapons ready. The hum intensified, growing into a throbbing bass line that resonated through their teeth. The form pulsed with energy, swirling and reforming like liquid fire. It stretched, elongated, and finally solidified into the shape of a humanoid figure, its features veiled in shimmering mist. It emitted a series of clicks and whistles that seemed to vibrate against their very beings. Zaria swallowed hard, her heart pounding against her ribs. This wasn't what she expected from a rogue energy field. This was something else entirely. Something far more terrifying. Rhys's grip tightened on his energy blade as the pulsing figure solidified. Containment protocols were designed for anomalies, not something intelligent, he muttered, his voice tight with apprehension. The shimmering figure remained motionless, its inky void eyes seemingly surveying them with chilling awareness. Its body rippled with an iridescent glow, a kaleidoscope of colors swirling beneath the mist that obscured its features. Then it extended a hand towards them, tendrils of light snaking out like ethereal fingers. Rhys, Zaria commanded, get ready for a diversion. She raised her plasma pistol, a pulse of power arcing through its core. A series of clicks and whistles resonated from the figure as it retracted its hand. The light beneath its form intensified, pulsing with an alarming frequency. The emergency lights flickering on the walls seemed to warp and shift in response. Zaria unleashed a stream of plasma fire. It streaked towards the anomaly, but dissipated harmlessly upon contact, swallowed by the swirling energy. "It's shielded," Rhys yelled. "We need to disable that first, or—" He didn't finish the sentence. The ground beneath them buckled with a shuddering tremor. Chunks of metal peeled away from the walls, showering them in debris. A chasm tore through the floor, its edges crackling with energy like molten glass. Zaria dove, her instincts screaming at her to move. Rhys grabbed her arm, hauling her to her feet just as debris cascaded around them. They scrambled away from the expanding chasm, adrenaline pumping through their veins. "It's trying," Rhys gasped out, clutching his side where a shard of metal had sliced into him. "Trying to separate us." Zaria glanced back at Rhys and saw blood seep through his armor. She gritted her teeth, pushing down on the searing pain blooming in her chest. She couldn't afford to worry about him now. They needed to escape this room. They sprinted deeper into the corridor, the ground trembling beneath their feet. The pulsing light pursued them, its tendrils reaching out like grasping claws, desperate to separate them. "Secure perimeter," Zaria shouted into her comm, her voice tight with urgency. Static hissed in response. "We're getting pulled into a vortex," she yelled over the roar of collapsing metal. A final tremor ripped through the station, leaving them suspended on a precarious ledge overlooking an abyss of swirling energy. Zaria pulled herself up, grabbing Rhys's hand and hauling him onto a secure footing. She turned to face him, her jaw tight with fear and determination. "We're going to need reinforcements," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "And fast." The pulsating anomaly rose from the chasm below, its eyes fixed on them, filled with an ancient malice that chilled them to their core. They knew this was only the beginning. "Secure perimeter." Zaria barked into her comm, her voice strained against the rising tremor that shook the station's very bones. Static crackled back, a symphony of malfunctioning systems. She shoved Rhys further down the corridor towards the flickering safety beacon they had spotted earlier. "It's trying to pull us apart." "My side," Rhys choked out, gripping his wounded ribs. The makeshift tourniquet he'd used on himself offered little comfort as blood oozed through the fabric of his armor. Zaria knew arguing wouldn't help. They had a beacon, limited power for their comlink, and dwindling hope. They just needed to reach it before they were pulled into that hungry abyss, an echo chamber of swirling energy ripping apart anything in its path. "We're going deeper," she yelled over the cacophony of failing alarms and collapsing metal. They plunged deeper into Sector D5, debris tumbling around them like a macabre avalanche. The pulsating light from the chasm pursued relentlessly, tendrils of iridescent energy reaching out like grasping claws. Each tremor threatened to shatter their world, sending shards of twisted steel raining down on them. Zaria swore under her breath as they squeezed through a narrow passageway, barely wide enough for their suits to fit. The flickering light source ahead offered only a faint beacon in the encroaching darkness. Then she saw it, a small hatch leading into a ventilation shaft. She could hear muffled voices beyond, possibly survivors, or perhaps even worse. "Rhys!" Zaria grabbed his free arm, pulling him towards the hatch. "We need to get inside." He gasped, leaning heavily on her as they scrambled through the entrance. The voice transmission grew louder, closer now. They clambered through a cramped tunnel of twisting pipework, every step filled with an ominous groan that echoed throughout the station's failing structures. Then, the voices were crystal clear and terrifyingly human. Trying to contain it, one hissed through the comm, their panicked breaths barely audible over the deafening thrumming behind them. "It's not like anything we've ever seen," another replied, trembling with fear. A cold dread gripped Zaria's heart. They weren't alone in this nightmare, and these survivors sounded as scared as she was. The voice came again, this time closer than before, laced with a chilling calmness that set her teeth on edge. "Welcome," it purred. "We've been expecting you." "This way," Zaria hissed, tugging Rhys toward a series of flickering lights ahead. "I hope they haven't turned into whatever is happening down here." Rhys winced, pressing a gloved hand against his side where the jagged piece of metal from the collapsing floor had embedded itself. "We're already walking blind. If anyone else is down here." He trailed off as they rounded a corner, coming face to face with three figures huddled in the glow of a malfunctioning maintenance panel. Two were clad in bloodied and torn power armor, their visors cracked open to reveal pale faces etched with exhaustion. But it was the third figure that sent a jolt of icy fear through Zaria. Tall, shrouded in a dark cloak despite the oppressive heat of the damaged reactor room, its head concealed by a featureless helmet, this unknown entity radiated an aura of chilling indifference. "Who are you?" Rhys demanded, his voice hoarse. "State your allegiance." One of the armored soldiers chuckled nervously, wiping grime from his visor. "We're just survivors, stranded down here since—" He glanced at his comrade, who shook his head silently, then back to Zaria and Rhys. "Since things went sideways, we haven't seen anything like whatever is chasing us." The cloaked figure stirred, its posture shifting like liquid shadow. A single crimson eye blinked open on the helmet's visor, fixing upon them with an intensity that pierced their very souls. A voice, devoid of inflection, reverberated through the room. "Survivors are unnecessary. Your purpose is predetermined." Zaria grasped her pulse rifle tighter. "Purpose? What are you talking about?" The voice chuckled, a hollow, mechanical sound that sent chills down her spine. "This station is no longer your concern. We control the flow now. You will serve your assigned function, as all biological organisms will." Zaria exchanged a worried glance with Rhys. Their escape route seemed to dissolve before their eyes. Trapped in this decaying space station, hunted by something beyond human comprehension, their only hope seemed to lie in understanding what the creature wanted and whether there was any way to survive its twisted plans. Rhys stepped forward, defiance flickering in his gaze despite the tremors of fear coursing through him. "What do you want from us?" The cloaked figure tilted its head, the crimson eye gleaming like a malevolent ruby. "You are fuel," it rasped. "We need organic matter to sustain this cycle." "We're not some fuel source," Zaria hissed back, taking a step towards the creature. Their pursuer had been terrifying, but at least they could understand. Fear of being consumed was a primal instinct. This thing, though, the figure simply stared at them, its gaze cold and unyielding. "Your struggle is futile. Resistance is irrelevant." Zaria swallowed hard, trying to maintain her resolve as the weight of their situation sank in. They were facing something far more terrifying than any enemy they'd encountered before. Something that did not play by their rules. Something that saw them as nothing more than fuel for its twisted agenda. "What about them?" Rhys gestured to the two armored figures, their faces now etched with a horrified understanding of their situation. "They didn't attack us." His words hung heavy in the oppressive silence that followed. The figure swiveled its scarlet gaze towards the cowering soldiers. "Biological waste," it stated flatly, "inefficient and obsolete. They will be repurposed." Zaria lunged forward, her pulse rifle a blur as she aimed it at the cloaked figure. "Don't they deserve to fight, to know what's happening?" The figure merely chuckled, a chilling rasp that reverberated through the cramped maintenance bay. A shimmering energy field coalesced around its form, deflecting Zaria's blast harmlessly. "They will not impede our progress. Resistance is futile." The metallic soldier closest to them let out a choked sob. "Please," he whimpered, raising his hands in surrender. "I just want to go home." His comrade went rigid, eyes fixed on the cloaked figure with a mix of terror and a desperate kindling of defiance. "We will make you strong," the cloaked figure intoned, a sinister cadence creeping into its voice. "Embrace your new purpose." Rhys saw movement in the corner of his eye. One of the armed soldiers, seemingly reacting to the cloaked figure's words, was frantically fumbling with something under their armor. They slammed a hand on a hidden panel, revealing a cluster of wires and blinking LEDs. "This is our last shot," the soldier shouted, eyes ablaze with a fierce determination. "We're overloading the auxiliary power reactor. It might take us all down." The cloaked figure recoiled as a surge of electrical energy arced from the panel. They shrieked, a distorted, inhuman wail that echoed through the metal corridors, before dissolving into a cloud of shimmering tendrils. Zaria felt a surge of adrenaline course through her veins. "What's happening?" she yelled over the deafening hum of the overloaded reactor. The soldier who had activated the device gestured desperately to the other figure. "Go, now! We only have a few minutes before." But his voice was cut short as the entire room erupted in a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar. The searing heat knocked Zaria off her feet, momentarily blinding her. As quickly as it began, the explosion passed, leaving behind only a choking cloud of acrid smoke. Coughing, she struggled to her vision cleared, taking in the carnage around her. Sparks showered from twisted metal, and jagged chunks of debris littered the floor where seconds before a frantic tableau had played out. Rhys groaned beside her, shielding his eyes against the lingering light. "Are you all right?" he rasped. Zaria managed a nod, gingerly feeling for any broken bones. Pain pulsed in her ribs, but she seemed otherwise intact. She scrambled to her feet and surveyed the scene, searching frantically for the two soldiers. "Where are they? Are they?" Suddenly, a low groan cut through the silence. One of the soldiers, clinging desperately to a twisted piece of metal, stared up at them with eyes wide with shock. The other soldier was slumped against a wall, seemingly unconscious. The energy, it overloaded, he choked out, his voice raspy and strained. "We need to get you both out of here," Zaria said, her heart pounding as she assessed the situation. The reactor control panel sputtered erratically before plunging into darkness, leaving them in an eerie glow cast by the emergency lights. But how? The exit's sealed. Rhys scanned their surroundings furiously. There's got to be another way out. His gaze landed on a narrow ventilation shaft, barely large enough for someone to squeeze through. "That's our only shot," he declared, moving towards it with purpose. As they helped the injured soldier clamber into the cramped space, Zaria felt a sense of grim certainty settle over her. Their escape was merely a temporary reprieve. They had avoided immediate combustion, but the creature's words echoed in her mind. "You are fuel." Her question gnawed at her. What would it do when it realized they had escaped? And who were they fueling? They huddled within the ventilation shaft, the darkness pressing in around them. A faint metallic tang filled the air, mingling with the stench of burnt circuitry. The injured soldier whimpered, clutching his arm. "What about the other one?" Rhys patted him on the shoulder, a somber expression etched on his face. "We'll find help," he assured, though he sounded uncertain even to himself. "But we have to move now." Zaria swallowed hard, pushing back her unease to focus on the task at hand. They needed to get out of this station, find allies who might understand the threat they faced. She dared not think about what awaited them outside these claustrophobic walls. Rhys shimmied deeper into the ventilation shaft, his flashlight beam dancing nervously across the grimy metal walls. "We've got to keep moving," he muttered, his voice tight with urgency. "There's still a chance this reactor could blow." The injured soldier grunted in agreement, pressing his side as if trying not to exacerbate the pain. "But I haven't seen anything, any place that looks like an escape route." His words were punctuated by ragged gasps of pain. Zaria squinted at the claustrophobic tunnel ahead. Maybe this leads us to another section, or more optimistically, a maintenance hatch. They squeezed forward, inching through the narrow space, the metallic tang of ozone filling their nostrils. Beyond it, an unnerving silence stretched, an eerie stillness that felt heavier than any booming explosion could have been. Hours seemed to crawl by in the suffocating darkness. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Rhys's flashlight beam flared against a faint glimmer ahead. "Hold on," he whispered, pushing forward with renewed determination. He emerged into a small, cluttered maintenance room. The glow of emergency lights cast wavering shadows across rusting tools and strewn wires. A narrow doorway carved its way out to someplace else. They carefully made their way through, the injured soldier leaning heavily on Rhys for support. "Somewhere else," Zaria murmured, her voice laced with cautious hope. "But where?" They stepped into a long hallway bathed in an unnervingly pale green light. A series of doors lined the sides, each emblazoned with strange cryptic symbols that shimmered faintly under the unearthly illumination. "This place feels different," Rhys said, his voice low and apprehensive. "Almost as if we've left one nightmare only to step into another." Zaria swallowed hard, trying to ignore the prickling sensation of unease crawling up her spine. A shiver ran through her despite the heat radiating from behind the warped safety glass paneling on the walls. They reached a door adorned with a swirling symbol resembling stylized wings caught in flight. Rhys pushed it open slowly, his flashlight beam illuminating a cluttered laboratory filled with strange instruments and glowing orbs suspended in midair. A cold draft seemed to emanate from within, chilling them to the bone. The faint hum of energy thrummed throughout the room, punctuated by the hiss of machinery. In the center of the lab, surrounded by a swirling vortex of green light, reclined a figure cloaked in shadow. They held a long, slender device that pulsed with a rhythmic light. The wounded soldier clutched Rhys's arm, his eyes wide with alarm. "It's him," he whispered, his voice trembling. "That's the being, the one who controls this place." Zaria stepped forward cautiously, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. What are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. The figure in the shadows tilted its head slightly, the green light reflecting off its shimmering dark mask. It extended the device towards them, a low, guttural hum echoing in response to their question. The symbols on the control panel flared brighter, and the vortex of energy around it swirled with increased intensity. "We are," a voice rasped from within the figure's mask, each word laden with an unnerving power, "the architects of your destiny, and you," its gaze fixed on Zaria, "are the key to our purpose." "Architects?" Rhys scoffed, stepping closer to the cloaked figure. "Of what destiny? You came here in those hideous metal suits, blasting through our defenses, speaking a dialect that sounded like birds choking on nails. What's so architecturally significant about any of that?" The figure remained motionless, its mask somehow seeming more menacing despite the absence of emotion. Its long, skeletal fingers tightened their grip on the device, sending pulses of green light rippling outwards. "Your perception is limited by your mundane reality," the rasping voice hissed. "We see beyond the fabric of your existence. We are the weavers of possibilities, the sculptors of fate." The wounded soldier, leaning heavily on Rhys's arm, whimpered. "Possibilities? If those possibilities lead to mass destruction and a lot of very dead people, I think they could stand some revision." Zaria stepped forward, her gaze unwavering in the face of the figure's strange power. "Tell us," she commanded, "what you want from us. What makes us so important to your architectural ambitions?" The masked figure chuckled, a hollow, metallic sound that sent shivers down Zaria's spine. "You are vessels of raw potential," it said, its voice like gravel scraping against bone. "Within you lies the key to unlocking dimensions unknown, to bending reality to our will." It gestured towards Zaria once more. "Your unique genetic signature, it resonates with an energy we have sought for centuries. You possess the power within you to shatter the barriers between worlds." "Shatter what? And why would we want to do that?" Rhys blurted out, frustration edging into his voice. "This reality," the figure hissed, its voice a terrifying whisper, "is but one of many. It is flawed, constrained. We seek to break free from its limitations and ascend to a higher plane, and you," its gaze narrowed onto Zaria, "are the conduit." Zaria felt a cold dread gripping her heart. This was not simply some hostile invasion. It was something far older, far more insidious. "What would happen if we refused?" she asked, her voice steady but tight with fear. "Refusal," the figure drawled, its voice now chillingly calm, "is never an option within the grand design." The device pulsed once more, the green light swirling faster and more intensely. "This meeting," it continued, each word laced with a terrifying conviction, "is not merely an introduction. It is a prologue to your destiny." A wave of nausea washed over Zaria as she realized the horrifying truth. These beings intended to use them, to unlock her potential, whether they wanted to or not. The device hummed with growing power, bathing the laboratory in an eerie green light. Fear mingled with a furious determination coursing through Zaria's veins. They would not be pawns in this game. She wasn't sure how, but she had to find a way to stop them before they succeeded in their whatever destiny this warped architect declared for them. The fate of countless worlds might depend on it. The wounded soldier clutched Rhys's arm tighter as a palpable tension filled the laboratory. "Don't trust them," he muttered, his words barely audible above the low hum of the pulsating device. Rhys met Zaria's gaze, their fear mirrored in each other's eyes. A desperate plan began to form in Zaria's mind. "We don't have much choice, do we?" she asked, forcing a calm tone that even she struggled to believe. "But maybe they haven't accounted for one more thing." She straightened her posture and lifted her chin, meeting the masked figure's unnerving gaze head-on. "Perhaps," Zaria said, playing into their hubris, "you don't fully understand what it takes to control us." The figure chuckled again, that same grating sound that sent shivers down her spine. "Such arrogance," it hissed. "Do you think your mortal limitations can defy the power we wield?" Zaria feigned a look of helplessness. "Maybe not," she conceded, taking a step backward, subtly moving towards the edge of the lab, where tools and equipment lay scattered on shelves. "But we possess something even you might not anticipate. Chaos." Rhys nodded, understanding her calculated risk. He pretended to stumble, his arm brushing against a heavy metal wrench hanging nearby. It clattered onto the floor with a resonant clang, drawing the figure's attention away from Zaria. The masked architect hissed in displeasure as it turned its attention towards the sound. "This is not part of our plan," it rasped. "You dare to disrupt the delicate balance we've established?" Before the figure could react further, Zaria darted forward, launching herself at the control panel surrounding the device. She slammed a fist into a series of buttons, their lights flashing erratically as alarms started blaring throughout the laboratory. The wounded soldier roared in pain, clutching his bandages tighter. "Now!" Zaria yelled to Rhys before he could question her sudden attack. With split-second speed, Rhys lunged and snatched up the heavy wrench from where it lay on the floor. Taking advantage of the chaos she had created, Zaria ripped loose a tangle of cables connected to the device. Sparks flew as the masked figure screamed, its voice filled with rage and fear. The weapon pulsed wildly as energy coursed through its circuits, threatening to overload. "You fools!" it roared, its mask cracking slightly under the immense strain. "Do not underestimate the consequences of your actions. You will pay dearly for this interference." The device sputtered and coughed, sending a pulse of energy that knocked Zaria off her feet. She landed hard on the cold floor, gasping in pain as she struggled to regain her bearings. Rhys charged forward, his face contorted with rage as he swung the wrench with all his might. He slammed it into the device's core, sending a brilliant flash of blinding white light across the laboratory. The room filled with the deafening shriek of tearing metal and overloading circuits. The last thing Zaria saw before the world went black was Rhys beside her, holding up a hand to shield her face from the searing light. They had bought themselves some precious time, but she knew this could be just the first act in a far more dangerous play.